Welcome to Sprinkle with Hope podcast and your host, Shane. Today, our guest is Beth Cavenaugh. She is a certified hospice and palliative care nurse. I think I said that right. An educator with over 14 years of experience in caring for terminally ill patients. She has been a registered nurse for over 24 years and holds a bachelor's degree in nursing from Creighton University. Beth has supported hundreds of patients and their families at inpatient units, in the home setting, and behind the scenes in hospice care. Compassion, patient autonomy, and transparent communication are the core of her care philosophy. Beth hopes to demystify death and dying so that powerful moment will be embraced as a normalized and celebrated life event. You can learn more about her at bethcavenaugh.com. Beth, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm looking forward to it too, because I have no idea where it's going to go.
That's the beauty of these podcasts, is we don't either. So just to give you a little bit of background, last night, my wife and I actually went to a mortuary. We met with the guys there, and they took us downstairs, and there's this whole room of coffins, and I thought, oh, this is a little bit creepy. I've never seen that many coffins. But we're starting to maybe plan for that. I'm not saying I expect to die soon, but so just something that I thought I'd share. So Beth,
wow. That's so, you seem so young to be planning for that. You might be the youngest person I ever know who's been to a mortuary. Looking around for a coffin.
Yeah. We just thought we should plan a little bit, maybe before the cost of everything goes way up. So we're just looking into it, and we'll see what happens. Wow. But talk to us a little bit about your background and what drives you to help people with this. Like, everybody's going to have to go through this point. But why do you do this?
Yeah, good question. My background is I've been a nurse for 25 years and a hospice nurse for 15. I think the biggest experience that I had, there have been a lot of experiences that kind of put me on this path, but the most profound one was my own mom's death. And I was able to take care of her for the last 3 months of her life before she died from lung cancer. And I had so many questions when I was taking care of her. And I'm a nurse. I had been a nurse, I was a new nurse, but I'm a trained medical professional. So I had so many questions when I was on this journey with her. And, it's awkward all of a sudden going from daughter to caregiver. I was giving her showers and taking her to the commode. And, it's an intimate journey. And, I wrote my book so that people could have more information about how to care for someone at the end of life. And it's about, a lot of it's about based on my own experience, being a caregiver for a loved one, but also all of my hospice experience and knowledge that I've accumulated over the years. And I think my drive, I don't know, it's kind of like what drives you guys to do your podcast.
Yeah.
You just you follow an inclination, right? And you just go with it. One of my biggest things in my life is just to keep following my heart and have things line up with my heart. And I've gotten better at it over the years. A lot of times there's the head piece that gets thrown in there, and the practical side of me. But so I just keep trying to follow my heart and do things that I'm excited about and feel like I can offer to people. I really feel like being with somebody at the end of their life is one of the most sacred things you can be privileged to be part of. And so I actually just feel lucky to be in the room.
Yeah. I can imagine that you've, being in these situations, you've also learned to, grow your compassion for others. Right. And so how is that, like compassion been a part of this whole you being this hospice care and helping these people at the end of their life? What's compassion to you?
I love that question. It's interesting. I'm pretty sure I've become a much more compassionate nurse since I got into hospice. And so August 2006 is when I landed at this beautiful hospice home in Portland. And I worked with all of these nurses that were so present and kind every step of the way. Like the difficult, meaning, there's a lot of, when families are there with them, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of grief, heavy, heavy grief. It's really intense at this time. And I watched, a lot of my compassion came from just watching my nurse mentors and all the aides that I worked with at that time, and really trying to develop my own sense of compassion. And even my husband will admit that I became, this is a little embarrassing, but that I became a much nicer caregiver to him when he was sick. He was like, "What is different about you?" And I go, "I'm really actually working on being compassionate." And because nurses are, our drive is to like make people independent and get up and, you got to get out of the hospital bed so you can go home. So we're kind of trained that way.
Sure.
And the compassion piece, it can be learned. I'm here to tell you, it can be learned. And you also have to do a lot of work to stay compassionate and stay composed and grounded. And so over the years, I have developed a lot of practices. It could be prayer, it could be meditation, it could be nature, really being intentional about how I stay centered. And if I'm feeling off kilter, know that I need to pull back maybe on social events or say no to things, or, go on a little trip somewhere away and be by myself. So I try to be very intentional about that. I definitely know when I'm not as compassionate as I can be. And, it's a constant practice being compassionate. And, so I'm definitely not, my family will tell you, I'm definitely not compassionate all the time, but it is, it's something I strive for. And I think it makes me a better nurse. So.
I like that advice. I like the word intentional. I'm finding personally that I'm learning more about that every day, that in life we need to be more intentional with a lot of things that we do. So I'm curious to know your experience. What are maybe one or two things that you've found that people perceive about dying and hospice that maybe we could all learn a lesson before we get into that? One of our close family members is close to dying. What's something that we can learn right now before that happens?
Well, there's a lot of things. I really, is there a family taking care of this family member?
Yeah. So let's say there is a family member. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of information when most hospice occurs in patients' homes, and family is taking care of them. And the learning curve is really steep for family members to kind of figure out what medications are and what kind of symptoms they're having, and how to prepare. So gathering up information, and usually hospices have a lot of information on the medications, anxiety, confusion, constipation, shortness of breath. So just like brass tacks, I would get some information that can be helpful to guide you on this journey. So there is less anxiety and fear.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think it's really important to, a lot of people don't think about this, but thinking about the moment of death and how you want to be, like you were talking about, being more intentional about how you show up with somebody, which is easy to do when somebody's dying, I think, which is part of the beauty of this work. Is I think people really realize, oh my God, grandpa only has maybe a month left.
Mhm.
And I think people can be much more intentional about the way they show up, how often they show up, and thinking about the moment of death. I say this because my mom, when she died, we put her in clean pajamas after she died. I mean, there were a lot of other things that happened at that moment, but we put her in clean pajamas, and then she was whisked away from the funeral home came and just took her in a body bag and took her away. And I feel like I do rituals now. We do rituals at our hospice home at the end of life after somebody dies. And it's being intentional with this moment, because the moment when somebody dies and after they've died is very profound and sacred.
Mhm.
And you can really be intentional, like maybe think about what you want to put your mom or your dad in. Maybe there was a favorite, jersey that dad liked to wear, or a gown for your mom or something, and have a flower and maybe play music, and maybe say a prayer or a poem that speaks to the patient and or the family. Really, really cultivating some kind of end of life ritual in this moment. Yeah, because I think it helps down the road with your grief process. I think about that moment for me with my mom when she was whisked away, and it's jarring. And
Mhm.
it makes
Yeah.
me feel sad that we didn't think about it. And it makes me feel like it's not unfinished business, but I feel like it could have been so much more profound for my family. My dad, who was in a state of denial the entire time while my
Yeah.
mom was dying. So I think it's really important to think about the moment of death and after the death, and be very intentional, as you're saying.
Yeah, I like that. And as you were kind of talking, it made me think that this is, some people don't or may not want to talk about this particular subject, right? And so what's kind of, maybe some things that will help kind of prepare us or get over that fear, of talking about these subjects and really being that intentional, or,
Mhm.
thinking about, because we may not want to talk about it, but I think it is important, and it is a sacred thing that it is going to happen, right? That they're going to be, taken to a different place. And so, have you found anything that maybe helps some of those people that are kind of in that denial stage and not wanting to talk about it? Or
Um, well, it's interesting because you kind of have to meet people where they are, right?
Mhm.
And we have a lot of family members who don't want to use the word hospice for their grandmother, because they don't want grandma to know she's dying, and then grandma will also want to pretend like everything's okay and protect their family. And so I think what you guys are doing is like such a beautiful start. I mean, your your podcast is on hope and positivity, and I love that you reached out to me because death and dying, it's not initially, people don't associate hope and positivity with it, but there's actually so much beauty and presence and peace that happens in this stage, that it's kind of remarkable. And that's why I just want people to show up when someone is
Mhm.
dying, and show up, because then you just get more comfortable with it. And then when you inevitably have people in your life who die, you'll just know more, and you'll feel more comfortable with it. I mean, almost everybody says that they're so happy that they were there, with their loved one. I don't have any regrets taking care of my mom. I mean,
Right.
one of the most it's probably the most profound thing I've ever been able to do in my life. And so I just want people to show up, because then you're just exposed to it rather than run away, which is
Mhm.
what most
Right.
people want,
Yeah.
you know.
Right. As you were talking about that, I was just thinking, I think that's so true that if we just show up for the moment, or we don't know when they're going to pass on, that we're there intentionally and just helping them through that's really all it is, that we're showing up instead of saying, no, we're not going to show up. And yeah, I thought I'd share a funny story that the funeral, they told us last night. They said this guy was always late for everything. And so in his little notes when he was dying, he put that it's important that I'm late to my own funeral. And so they started it, and 10 minutes later they roll him in. And that was intentional. He did that because he was late to his own funeral. It's like, that's hilarious. But and I, Beth, I agree with you. I think Jason and I, we have a really positive mindset. We talk a lot about hope. And some people might think, oh, death isn't very hopeful and very positive, but it's a mindset. We believe in any situation, you can turn it into a positive one if you want.
Mhm,
That's
mhm,
just how we believe. So
mhm.
very fascinating stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah, and death also makes you, I mean, I bet going to that mortuary last night, it really makes you think about how you're living in this moment,
Yeah.
right? I
Right.
mean, you and your wife were probably a little bit nicer to each other last night, right?
A little bit.
I mean, that's what
Yeah.
that's what happens to me. I come home and I like sit down with my kids a little more, like when I can, because I think about it all the time. Like I might die. Who knows when my terminal illness is going to strike. So
Yeah.
it really does. I mean, I'm not great all the time, but it does foster this sense of urgency for the
Mhm.
moment. So
Yeah. I mean,
I love
to blurt it out, the reality of it is that none of us are going to make it out of this life alive. And so, I think that the sooner we face that and say that is going to be the reality, there's going to be a point in time where my body's not physically on this planet anymore unless it's buried underground. And so make the best of that time that you're in right at that moment. And I know none of us do that 100% well all the time. I'll be the first to admit that. I've made
Amen.
mistakes or whatever, but I think I agree with you that living in that moment and making sure that we, take those times to let the people that we love know we love them right now. So
Yeah. And you just said our body's not going to be here in this, on this planet. But I also I've had so many experiences where patients are communicating with patients who are dying, they're communicating with their loved ones who've died before,
mhm.
or they have, one of their spiritual people, Jesus, God, in the room with them. They have their deceased loved one, husband who died 10 years prior in the room with them. So I feel like it's a really beautiful part of this process also is being connected to the divine and whatever that means to people. But I do also feel like what everybody has so many different viewpoints, of course, about
Sure.
what's beyond this life.
Mhm.
um, but I think that's also a really important thing to think about and contemplate. I mean, I can't help but think that there's something beautiful and amazing after this,
Right.
and I can't help but communicate with my people who have died. I talk to my
Mhm.
mom and dad all the time. They're some of
Sure.
my spiritual gurus. So
Yeah.
I love that part of living. Actually, I think it makes my life a little more interesting.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful that you said that. You've had all these experiences where people have had those loved ones in their room, even though they might not physically be there, that in spirit they're there. That I would
Mhm.
imagine those are so touching moments that, I have only had one cousin who has shared something similar like that. Nobody else really has said anything like that to me, but that's what we're talking about, which is getting the hope and the positivity out of the whole situation, which is looking at that. They might physically be dead, but that doesn't mean that they're gone. And like you and your parents, you're talking to your mom all the time, and she's talking back to you. So that's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So Beth, we talk a lot about hope. It's really important to Jason and I. We've come up with what we call the double down dose. Are you ready for this?
Yes, double down dose. Okay.
If you can't see Beth, she's getting prepared. She's mentally and physically getting ready for this. Okay, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
The first question of the double down dose is simply this. How would you define hope?
I think hope is actually a practice that you also have to cultivate, like compassion. And it's a mindset that you have to practice. And I think it's, probably doing what you're doing, like let me think. I'm sorry, I'm being a little wordy without making any sense at all. Hope is seeing the light in the dark.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I agree.
I don't even know how that came to me. That's
probably my mom.
We will take it.
Yep, it was your mom.
Yeah, absolutely. That is beautifully said. So the second part of the double down dose that sometimes trips people up, but so I'm curious your take on it. But how would you define love, or what would you say is love?
God, love feels like an emotion. It feels like connection. It feels like happy and sad and joy and despair. It feels like it's the connection piece. It's like connection. When I think of all the things and people that I love in my life, I feel everything, with these humans in my life. Yeah, love is a connection.
I appreciate the fact that you paused for a second or two to really think about that question. And we love asking that because often we as humans don't think about it on a different level. And I could see that you went to the level that we are hoping everybody does, so that you just ponder what it really means to you, not just, oh yeah, it's this and that, but you could sense that you really are thinking about that simple question, what is love? And
it really is an easy question.
Easy question, but it's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not easy to answer.
Yeah, I just love that you paused for a second and just gathered your thoughts. And we love asking those two questions.
Do you guys have definitions for it?
Hope to me is a positive outlook on the future. So just looking to the future in a positive way, believing that things are going to go better.
Yeah, and I would add to that and say that it's not looking in the past. So the past is the past, and I'm not worried about it. And so I'm only looking from today into tomorrow and the next day of what I would like to accomplish and help people to experience and grow in their life.
I love that. And how about love for you guys?
Love to me, it is an easy question, but I think it's so difficult for people to express in words because you feel it so deeply. And so, for me, love is the center of my life. It's the center of my universe. And so when you love somebody or love, something, like a dog or whatever, that
Mhm.
love is going to radiate outwards. And I just picture it as an energy. You're sending that energy out to everything that you feel so deeply about, but you don't have words to express it.
Wow.
And I would say, I agree with both of you what love is. I would simply add that for me, love, it can be a feeling, but it's more about action and the things that you're doing to develop that love for whomever or whatever you have that feeling for. It is a feeling, but it's more the action to get that feeling. It, and what Jason was talking about, energy, we talk a lot about. So the energy that you're putting out, which could be love for everybody, it's going to come back to you. I don't believe that's karma because I don't
Mhm.
believe in that stuff. I just
Mhm.
think the energy that you're putting out is going to come back to you. So if you have a negative mindset and you're putting that energy out, guess what's going to come back?
Yeah.
You're going to struggle with life and all of these things that we're talking about. So
Wow.
good
Yeah.
questions, Beth.
You guys are good. I think we could drop the mic and go home. Those were beautiful responses, you guys.
Yeah, but we've actually, I don't remember ever being asked the question. So I appreciate that. We ask every one of our guests and we always get completely different answers. So Beth, thank you so much for joining us today. We have really enjoyed this discussion. I can tell you, you are part of our family. Is there anything that you want to add at the end? Maybe how our listeners can get a hold of you, or any just last tidbits that you want to share with us?
So I have a website. It's bethcavenaugh.com, and people can see my book there. And I also have a blog and a newsletter. I want people to have information about death and dying so that they can be better prepared. I've never even discussed going to a mortuary at the age of the young age of whatever you are. Shame. But but just to really contemplate that you are going to die at some point, and so how do you want to move forward in this life? I think that really informs, can be very informative.
Mhm. Yeah.
Think about it. I mean, it's the thing that makes me keep doing the work that I'm doing, and be nicer to my kids and my husband, and it's buy a ticket to Hawaii.
Yes.
Amen.
So I think I love that we talked about it, just like contemplating it and being intentional about it. And I love that you visited a mortuary last night, Shane. That's cool.
Yeah, it
You guys
really
have been
is.
really lovely. Thank you so much
It,
for having me.
yep. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
I haven't decided yet to go visit one of those. So, but I know at some point I will. So anyway, thank you so much, Beth, for joining us and just sharing, something that is personal to people. And, I mean, I believe it is a sacred time, that the end of life, and it can be a subject that's hard to talk about, but so needed and necessary. So thank you for coming on and sharing your light and love with us in the world on how to help these people.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I feel honored to be on your podcast.